Good evening. You're now with me, Lorenzo Isaac, for TVS Nightline. We begin with this story. Authorities are ramping up the fight against rabies as a pilot oral vaccination program expands into TAMAN MALIHAH. The move comes amid heightened public alarm following the recent death of a 10-year-old child linked to an infection in the area. The initiative is led by the Sarawak Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SSPCA.
25 teams are on the ground deploying vaccine baits to target stray dog populations that are difficult to reach through traditional injections. Officials say the operation involves door-to-door drives and post-vaccination monitoring to ensure maximum coverage in residential zones. SSPCA, however, stressed that the ORV is not intended for public handling or administration to domestic pets. The initiative is supported by international partners, including World Veterinary Services, to strengthen technical capacity and assess outcomes. A 12-month evaluation will be conducted with the Department of Veterinary Services to determine the long-term effectiveness of the baiting program. Malihah is known to be a hotspot for rabies, which recently claimed the life of a 10-year-old boy from Kuching. The latest fatality brings the cumulative number of human rabies infections in the state to 93 since the outbreak was declared in July 2017.
45 foreign nationals are behind bars after an early morning immigration crackdown at 2 construction sites. The group comprises 39 men and 6 women aged between 21 to 50. Immigration authorities say several individuals attempted to escape by climbing unfinished building structures and breaking through zinc fences. All attempts failed as enforcement personnel had surrounded the perimeter. The charges include not possessing valid travel documents, misuse of passes and overstaying. All detainees were taken to the immigration depot for further action. A 33-year-old man is in custody after police seized over 630,000 ringgit worth of narcotics in a double raid in Miri. Miri District Police Chief ACP Muhammad Farhan Lee Abdullah says the first raid was conducted in Desa Murni, Bandar Baru, Permajaya, leading to the arrest of the suspect and seizure of drugs believed to be MDMA, weighing an estimated 150 grams.
Follow-up intel led cops to a second house where they uncovered another 3.37 kilograms of the same substance. The total seizure is valued at over 634,000 ringgit, a haul police say is capable of supplying more than 4,000 individuals. Muhammad Farhan says the case is under investigation under Section 39B of the 1952 Dangerous Drugs Act. Enforcement teams are currently tracking syndicate members still at large to ensure the network is completely dismantled.
Despite rising implementation costs, both the federal and Sarawak government remains committed to ensuring the Rural Water Supply BALB project in the state achieves 100% coverage within the next 4 years. Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi says cost escalation is among the main challenges currently being addressed through mechanism under the National Economic Action Council M10.
Antara cabarannya ialah kerana peningkatan kos. Ini akan ada garis panduan yang akan dibuat oleh Majlis Tindakan Ekonomi Negara M10 yang akan membuat pandangan ke Kabinet atau kepada Jemaah Menteri, dan ianya akan dilakukan pengumuman jika ada sebarang pengumuman sama ada penambahan ataupun downsizing ataupun beberapa adjustment yang akan dilakukan.
Zahid adds that a total of 80 rural water supply projects in Sarawak are involved with an estimated value of 3.47 billion ringgit.
Walaupun terdapat beberapa kekangan, Kerajaan Persekutuan dan Kerajaan Negeri tidak berhasrat untuk menuding jari kepada mana-mana pihak, tetapi mencari jalan penyelesaian ke arah bagi pembekalan air luar bandar ini. Dan Saya ingin menyebutkan bahawa daripada 80 projek itu, terdapat 50 projek di bawah pra pelaksanaan, 9 projek yang telah dilaksanakan dan 20 projek pasca pelaksanaan, artinya telah siap, ya, dan 1 dibatalkan.
He further adds that to improve coordination, all BALB projects will be fully handed over to the Sarawak Rural Water Supply Department, funded by the Ministry of Rural and Regional Development. Zahid also emphasizes that the government's priority now is to find collective solutions to ensure people, especially in rural areas, have more comprehensive and sustainable access to clean water.
As announced yesterday by US President Donald Trump, America will begin the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz today. Plus, Iran reports a whopping $270 billion in damages from US-Israeli strike that began on February 28. For the details, we have Atikah Norman on the case.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Our top agenda today will be the U.S. blockade at the Strait of Hormuz. It began implementing a blockade of all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports. The U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, which is responsible for military operations in West Asia and elsewhere, states that the blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or leaving Iranian ports in the Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Further statements reveal that it will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. Strikes by the US and Israel has caused damages amounting to $270 billion, according to preliminary estimates by the Iranian government. Spokesperson Fatima Muhajirani says more precise figures will be determined by the government's economic bloc, whose staff is conducting an assessment in several stages. The first stage is an assessment to damage to buildings, whilst the second involves damage associated with lost budget revenue and the closure of industrial facilities. Muhajirani notes that the issue of U.S. military reparation to Iran is one of the topics being discussed by the Iranian negotiating team. Negotiations have yet to resume, but Tehran expresses a readiness for negotiations and reaching an agreement, but only based on principles and logic. Iran's judiciary chief, Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, expounded on the current conditions of Iran and the failed objectives of the enemy in both field and diplomacy after 40 days of the US-Israeli war of aggression. The top judge says that the Americans, with their usual arrogance and haughtiness, and following their fixed formula of negotiations, namely imposing false statements, appeared in the Pakistani-mediated talks in Islamabad on April 11th, trying to obtain from the negotiation table what they could not achieve in the 40-day war. Contrary to what Iran said, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says that the U.S. made a lot of progress after talks with Iran in Pakistan took place. However, he warns that failure to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz could, quote, fundamentally change the course of negotiations. On an American news channel, Vance states that America's priority remains the same, to prevent Iran from developing its own nuclear weapons. This, in fact, has been debunked by many parties, both American and Iranians alike. He also expects Iran to continue steps toward reopening the Strait of Hormuz, calling it critical for global economic stability. Meanwhile, U.S. stocks closed higher on Monday as investors expressed renewed optimism that a deal could eventually be reached between the United States and Iran. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.63% to 48,218.25. The S&P 500 added 1.02% to 6,886.24, while the Nasdaq Composite Index increased 1.23% to 23,183.7. The gains came despite the breakdown of weekend peace talks in Islamabad and the implementation of a U.S. blockade of all maritime traffic in and out of Iran's ports, which went into effect today. And finally, Donald Trump, less than a day ago, claimed that Iran called and wants to make a peace deal after marathon talks in Pakistan ended without any agreement.
Well, he's done a good job, and Steve and Jared, they've all done a very good job. And I can tell you that we've been called by the other side. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
We'll see what Will Trump comes up with tomorrow. That's all for tonight. I'm Atika Norman. Back to Lorenzo for the rest of tonight's report.
Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto was in Moscow on Monday for high-level talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin as both countries signal deepening economic and strategic ties. Our correspondent Anastasia Volodina has more from the Russian capital on what this means for Indonesia's growing global role and its new position in BRICS.
Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto is in the Russian capital where he met and held talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, after welcoming his Indonesian counterpart, stated and underlined some very important points about the relations between the two countries. Well, first and foremost, he stated that the trade turnover between Russia and Indonesia has grown by over 12%. He also underlined specifically that Indonesia has become a full-fledged BRICS member, and that will open the doors for further cooperation.
The strategic nature of our relations manifests itself primarily, of course, in the economic sphere. Indonesia has become a full member of BRICS, and this is another opportunity for cooperation, just like between Indonesia and the Eurasian Economic Union.
He also made it very specific that Russia and Indonesia cooperate in the field, including energy, adding that foreign ministries of both countries are working intensively with one another. And according to reports, prior to Prabowo's state visit to the Russian capital, Indonesian foreign minister stated that the two sides will discuss the potential for Indonesia to buy Russian oil as an alternative source due to the current war in Iran and generally due to the global supply shortfall. Earlier, Indonesian president himself stated prior to his visit and prior to his talks with the Russian president, he stated that Indonesia is entering an awakening phase, emphasizing on stronger economic growth and rejection of this type of narrative of Indonesia in decline.
Maksud dan tujuan saya hari ini datang, intinya adalah untuk mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Presiden Putin, pemerintah Rusia atas dukungan Rusia kepada Indonesia. Pertama, kami diterima begitu cepat di BRICS.
Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto also touched upon one very important topic, and that's the topic of financial transactions. And he stated that this area needs additional interactions, and he also made it very clear that he personally is willing to participate to speed up the process. So, of course, from what's been said by both sides, the relations between the two nations are, of course, strengthening and developing, and both countries are, of course, set to take them further.
Get all the updates you need all in one app. TVS Inspire brings you live updates on events, news and programs. Available now on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. TVS Inspire, hold on your screen, anytime, anywhere. Those were the updates on TVS Nightline. I'm Lorenzo Isaac. Thank you for watching and have a good night.